My girlfriend decided to steal money from me on Valentine's Day. Phil and Jennifer were the kind of couple that made people believe in fairy tales. They had met in high school, two 17-year-olds who found something in each other that felt irreplaceable. Their connection was instant, their love story seamless. Over the years, their relationship grew, evolving past young love into something deeper. They went to the same college, navigated adulthood together, moved in, and started planning a future side by side. Phil was the kind of man who listened, really listened. He remembered the little things Jennifer said in passing, like how she once mentioned an engagement ring she had seen in a magazine years ago. When he finally proposed, he made sure it was with that exact ring. It wasn't about the price or the size of the diamond. It was about proving that he saw her, that he had always been paying attention. Jennifer had cried when he got down on one knee. Not out of surprise, she had known a proposal was coming, but because it was perfect, because he was perfect. Their families were thrilled, their friends were envious. They were the golden couple, the ones who had it all figured out. The wedding was set for June 2025. Everything was in place. The venue, the guest list, the dress Jennifer had spent months searching for. Their lives were neatly arranged, every detail meticulously planned. There was no room for doubt, no space for missteps. And then, in one single night, everything collapsed. It wasn't a slow unraveling. It wasn't one of those situations where people look back and see all the cracks that were already there. No, this was an explosion, sudden and undeniable. The night started like any other. Phil had been exhausted from work, so he stayed home, while Jennifer went out with some friends. Nothing unusual. They trusted each other. They always had. But something felt off. Maybe it was the way she hesitated before leaving, or the way she was unusually protective of her phone that evening. Maybe it was the sixth sense that comes when you've known someone long enough to pick up on the slightest change. Phil didn't want to be that guy. He didn't want to be the insecure fiancé who questioned where she was or who she was with. So he pushed the feeling aside. Until the moment he couldn't. The message came late, too late. A name he didn't recognize flashing across Jennifer's phone, which she had carelessly left behind in her rush out the door. A single notification previewed on the screen. "I can't stop thinking about last night." Phil felt his heart slam against his ribs. His hands shook as he picked up the phone. He told himself not to look, not to go down that road, but his body acted before his mind could stop it. He unlocked the screen, scrolled through the messages. And there it was. Evidence. Proof that the life he had built, the love he had invested in, was nothing more than an illusion. Words he never should have had to read. Jennifer's name intertwined with another man's in ways that made Phil's stomach churn. Messages filled with the kind of intimacy that belonged to him, that she had promised only to him. He couldn't breathe. His first instinct was denial. This had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe this was an old conversation. Maybe this was some kind of joke. But the timestamps were fresh. And then the pictures. Blurry, late-night shots, but unmistakable. Jennifer. And someone else. He didn't remember dropping the phone. Didn't remember how long he sat there, staring at the floor, his world caving in. Everything hurt. The humiliation, the betrayal, the sheer absurdity of it all. He thought about the wedding invitations already sent, the deposits already paid. He thought about the way Jennifer had looked at him just that morning, telling him she loved him. Had she meant it? Or had she just gotten better at lying? The worst part wasn't the messages. It wasn't even the images. It was the realization that he had never suspected a thing. That while he was planning their forever, she was slipping away, one secret at a time. She came home hours later, smiling, her cheeks flushed from the night out. She had no idea that Phil had seen everything, that he was standing in the ruins of what they used to be. She kissed his cheek like nothing had changed. But everything had. Phil sat in the dimly lit living room, his mind replaying Jennifer's words over and over. "I just want to try a taller guy before settling down." She had laughed when she said it. Just a casual joke during a girls' night. But Phil knew the difference between a joke and a confession disguised as one. The way her friends had egged her on, especially Melissa, who had immediately jumped in with suggestions. "Oh, I know this basketball coach, Jennifer. Tall, athletic, you should totally go for it before it's too late." It wasn't just banter. It was permission. It was encouragement. Phil hadn't reacted. He hadn't called her out in front of everyone. He had just sat there, smiling, pretending not to hear, while something inside him cracked. The next morning, he convinced himself it was nothing. A stupid comment made in passing. But doubt had already sunk its claws into him. And once doubt took hold, it was impossible to ignore the things that had always been there, hiding in plain sight. The first red flag was the text. Jennifer had never been secretive with her phone before. She had never needed to be. But suddenly, she was deleting messages. She didn't just clear notifications, she wiped entire conversations. Phil would notice her swiping quickly whenever he walked by, her fingers moving too fast, like she was trying to erase something before he could see. Then came the changed passwords. They had always been open with each other. They knew each other's passcodes, had access to each other's emails. It wasn't about control, it was about trust. But one day, Phil tried to check something on their shared tablet, and he was locked out. Password changed. When he casually asked Jennifer about it, she acted surprised. "Oh, I must have reset it. I'll send you the new one." She never did. The work events started after that. Jennifer worked as a nurse, and her schedule had always been unpredictable, but she had never been one to stay out late for professional gatherings. Now, suddenly, there were these mandatory networking events she couldn't miss. Dinners, conferences, weekend retreat. When Phil asked what they were about, she gave vague answers, brushing him off with a quick kiss on the cheek before hurrying out the door in a dress he had never seen before. Then there were the hospital night shift. Phil had seen her schedule. He knew when she was supposed to work. Yet she started getting dressed up for extra shifts that weren't listed. Full makeup, hair done, wearing perfume. Not exactly the look of someone heading to an exhausting 12-hour hospital shift. The first time, he let it slide. The second time, he checked the hospital's online schedule. Her name wasn't there. The third time, he followed her. He felt pathetic, sitting in his car across the street, watching Jennifer get into an Uber. His heart pounded as he trailed behind, gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. She wasn't going to the hospital. She wasn't even going anywhere professional. The car took her to an upscale bar across town. Not a restaurant, not a hotel, just a bar. Phil parked and watched from a distance as she walked inside, her posture different, her smile more alive than he had seen in months. She wasn't tired. She wasn't overworked. She was excited. And then, a man walked in. Tall. Athletic. Phil knew before Jennifer even greeted him. Before she leaned in too close, before she laughed too hard at something he said. He knew. Melissa had set it up. The basketball coach. Phil sat there, stomach churning, hands frozen on the wheel. He could have walked in. Could have confronted her in front of everyone, could have shattered the illusion in an instant. But instead, he just sat there, letting the humiliation sink into his bones. Because this wasn't an accident. Jennifer wasn't slipping away. She was choosing to leave. When she finally got home hours later, she acted normal. Too normal. She climbed into bed beside him, sighing as she stretched, as if she had actually just come home from work. She even kissed his cheek. "Long night," she murmured. "I'm exhausted." Phil stared at the ceiling. He had never felt so small in his life. Phil had spent the entire night awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Jennifer's slow, steady breathing beside him. She had no idea. No idea that the night shift she claimed to have worked was a lie he had already uncovered. No idea that the doorbell camera had caught everything, the way she had stepped out of their apartment in a dress far too elegant for a hospital shift, the way she had fixed her hair one last time before leaving. No idea that he had followed her, sitting in his car across the street from the bar, watching as she walked in, greeted the tall man with an all-too-familiar smile, and let him pull her into his world like Phil had never even existed. 4 hours, Phil had sat there in the dark, playing the scene over and over again in his mind, trying to piece together how they had ended up here. The years they had spent together, the promises, the love, all of it felt like it had been leading to this moment, to him lying next to a woman who had just spent the night in another man's company and then climbed into their bed as if nothing had happened. The humiliation was suffocating. By morning, he was done waiting. When Jennifer woke up, she stretched lazily, rubbing her eyes before reaching for her phone, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. Phil sat up, voice steady but sharp. "How was work?" Jennifer didn't even flinch. She didn't hesitate, didn't stumble. She gave him a tired smile, sighing dramatically. "Exhausting. So many patients. I barely sat down all night." Phil felt his jaw tighten. The audacity. He pulled out his phone, opened the doorbell camera app, and hit play. The video was silent, but the truth didn't need sound. Jennifer, stepping out of their apartment in her dress, purse in hand, hair curled, lipstick perfect. Nothing about her looked like someone heading into a long shift at the hospital. Jennifer's smile froze. Before she could say a word, Phil swiped to the next video. The one he had recorded from his car. Jennifer, sitting at the bar, laughing, leaning too close to the basketball coach Melissa had set her up with. Jennifer's face drained of color. "Phil, wait." He didn't wait. "So tell me again, Jennifer," he said, voice calm, too calm. "How was work?" Her breath hitched, eyes darting between him and the phone. The silence stretched so long it was suffocating. Then, finally, she did what he had known she would do. She started crying. "Phil, I swear, it's not what it looks like. I was just meeting a friend. Melissa set it up, but it wasn't like that. I didn't do anything. Please, you have to believe me." Phil didn't flinch. Jennifer reached for his hand, but he pulled away. The tears came harder. "I messed up, okay? I just wanted to feel wanted. You don't understand what it's like. I wasn't even going to do anything, I swear. Please don't do this, Phil, please." Phil had spent nearly a decade with this woman. He had heard every tone of her voice, had memorized every expression on her face. He knew when she was lying. And she was lying now. He stood up, his movements slow, deliberate. "The wedding's off." Jennifer's entire body jerked like he had slapped her. "What? No, Phil, no. You don't mean that. Please, just give me a chance to explain. I love you. I was just stupid. It didn't mean anything." Phil exhaled, shaking his head. "You lied to my face, Jennifer. You were ready to spend the rest of your life with me while sneaking around behind my back. This isn't a mistake. It's a choice. And I'm done." The begging didn't last long. Something in Jennifer's face twisted, the panic morphing into something sharper, something cruel. The tears dried up in an instant, replaced by something ugly. "Oh my God, Phil, are you serious right now? You're actually doing this? Over one night?" Phil stayed silent. Jennifer scoffed, crossing her arms. "You know what? Maybe this is for the best. I've been walking on eggshells around you for years. You're so insecure, it's pathetic. You just can't handle the fact that other men might actually find me attractive. God, no wonder I wanted to see what else was out there. You're exhausting." Phil felt the words like a slap, but he didn't react. He wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Jennifer laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "You think you're the victim here? Please. You were never enough for me, Phil. And deep down, you know it." Phil clenched his jaw. He wanted to say something, wanted to throw every ounce of pain back in her face, but what was the point? There was nothing left to save. So instead, he just turned and walked away. But Jennifer wasn't done. By the time Phil started telling people the wedding was off, Jennifer had already beaten him to it. She spun the story before he had a chance. Suddenly, he was the villain. The controlling, possessive fiancé who had smothered her until she couldn't breathe. The jealous man who had accused her of things she never did. Friends started pulling away. Mutual acquaintances whispered when he walked into a room. Even people he had known for years hesitated before taking his side. Melissa was the worst. "Phil, you seriously called off the wedding over nothing? She was just having a drink. You're paranoid." One by one, people fell for Jennifer's version of events. Phil realized then that he hadn't just lost Jennifer. He had lost almost everything. And she didn't even look back. Phil was exhausted. Days had passed since he had called off the wedding, and yet Jennifer's presence still lingered in his life like a stain he couldn't scrub out. Everywhere he turned, there was another whisper, another mutual friend looking at him with that mix of hesitation and judgment. Jennifer had done a spectacular job of rewriting history, making herself the victim, painting Phil as the controlling, insecure fiancé who had overreacted to nothing. But the truth had a way of surfacing. It came when Phil least expected it. He was sitting in a quiet bar, trying to clear his head, when Kyle, Melissa's boyfriend, slid into the seat across from him. Kyle wasn't exactly Phil's friend, more of an acquaintance, someone he had shared beers with at group events but never really talked to one-on-one. That's why Phil was surprised when Kyle leaned forward, an uncomfortable look on his face. "Look, man, I know you don't owe me anything, but I need to tell you something." Phil raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything, letting Kyle continue. "Melissa's been running her mouth about the whole thing with Jennifer and—" He hesitated. "Dude, you don't even know the half of it." Phil's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Kyle sighed, rubbing his face. "That whole night? It wasn't some innocent mistake. Jennifer and Melissa planned it. They set up that meeting with the basketball coach weeks in advance. The whole point was to make it seem like Jennifer was single, like she was out there looking for someone better before she settled for you." Phil felt his pulse hammering in his ears. "Melissa even told Jennifer to act available," Kyle continued. "She thought if she played it right, the guy would make a move. It was all a game, man. A disgusting, humiliating game." Phil's fingers curled into fists. He had known Jennifer betrayed him, but hearing how calculated it was, how premeditated, made his skin crawl. "And the worst part?" Kyle let out a short, humorless laugh. "The guy barely noticed her. He ignored her the entire night. She tried flirting, tried getting his attention, and he just wasn't interested. She left that bar humiliated, not because she felt guilty, but because she failed." Phil's chest felt tight. So that was the truth. Jennifer hadn't just made a mistake. She had actively tried to cheat on him. She had walked into that bar with the intention of finding someone better. And the only reason she hadn't succeeded was because the guy she threw herself at simply didn't care. Phil didn't know whether to laugh or feel sick. For so long, he had questioned himself. Had he overreacted? Had he been too harsh? But now, hearing this, he felt nothing but relief. Jennifer had burned everything to the ground. And she had done it for nothing. He didn't bother calling her. Didn't bother waiting for the right moment. He drove straight to their apartment, walked inside, and dropped his keys on the counter. Jennifer was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, acting like life hadn't completely imploded. She looked up and smiled, like she had been waiting for this moment. Like she had known he would come crawling back. "Phil," she started, her voice soft, rehearsed. "Kyle told me everything." The smile vanished. Phil watched her carefully, waiting for the act to drop. Jennifer's mouth opened, then closed again. Her fingers clenched around her phone. "I don't." His voice was firm. Jennifer's entire body stiffened. And then, as if on cue, the performance began. She crumbled, hands covering her face as she let out a shaky sob. "Phil, please. I was stupid, okay? I got caught up in it. I never meant to hurt you." He didn't move. It didn't even mean anything. He didn't even. She cut herself off, realizing too late what she was about to admit. Phil's lips curled. Yeah, I heard. He didn't even want you. That must have stung. Jennifer's head snapped up, and for the briefest moment, her expression twisted into something sharp. Angry. Then, just as quickly, the tears returned. But that's the point. Nothing happened. It was just a stupid night, Phil, I swear. Please, don't throw away everything we built over this. Phil exhaled slowly. You threw it away, Jennifer. The second you decided I wasn't enough. Jennifer shook her head violently, crawling off the couch and grabbing his hands. No, no, no. I was stupid, okay? But I love you. I love us. We can fix this. No, we can't. She let out a sharp, broken sound, gripping his wrists tighter. I'll do anything. Please, Phil, I'll cut Melissa off. I'll go to therapy. I'll let you check my phone, anything you want. Just please, don't do this. Phil's hands were like ice as he pulled away. I already did. Jennifer collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. But Phil didn't feel anything anymore. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just exhaustion. He turned, walked to the door, and didn't look back. Jennifer had already lost him. She just didn't know it yet. Phil barely had time to process everything before Jennifer's family decided to stage an intervention. It was less than 48 hours after he had walked out for good when he got the text. Jennifer's mom, Linda, had invited him over for a calm, mature conversation. She framed it like they all just needed to talk, as if a little communication would fix everything. Phil had half a mind to ignore it. He owed these people nothing. But a small, bitter part of him wanted to see how far they were willing to go to excuse Jennifer's actions. So, against his better judgment, he went. When he arrived, he was met with a scene so staged it almost made him laugh. Jennifer's parents sat together on the couch, looking somber but expectant. Her sister, Claire, perched on the armrest, arms crossed like she had already made up her mind. And Jennifer was sitting in the middle of it all, looking smaller than Phil had ever seen her, eyes red, hands clasped in her lap like a scolded child. Phil didn't sit. Linda was the first to speak, her voice gentle, rehearsed. Phil, honey, we just want to talk. We all know tensions have been high, and sometimes, when people get close to a big life change, they panic. Phil exhaled sharply. There it was. Pre-wedding jitters. That was going to be their excuse. That Jennifer had panicked and done something stupid, but it wasn't really her fault. Jennifer's father, Mark, looked uncomfortable. He wasn't making eye contact with anyone, just staring down at the floor with a tight jaw. Phil, Linda continued, soft and pleading. Jennifer made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But every couple has bumps in the road. You can't just throw away years of love over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Phil felt something inside him snap. A misunderstanding? His voice was cold, controlled. He turned his gaze to Jennifer, who had barely spoken since he walked in. Go ahead, Jennifer. Tell them what you said to your friends that night. Tell them exactly why you went to that bar. Jennifer's entire body stiffened. Phil. No. Phil's lips curled into a humorless smile. Fine. I'll do it for you. And then, slowly, clearly, he repeated Jennifer's exact words. I just want to sleep with someone taller once. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer's father finally looked up, and his face was pale, his lips pressed into a tight, thin line. Claire shifted uncomfortably but still rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Phil, do you have to be so dramatic? She didn't actually do it. You act like she cheated. She tried to. Phil cut her off. She planned it. She lied. She dressed up and walked into that bar with the sole intention of finding someone better than me. Jennifer sucked in a shaky breath. Phil, please. No. We're done. Linda's eyes darted between them, panic creeping into her voice. But she loves you, Phil. She just got confused. This isn't worth ruining everything. She ruined it, Phil said flatly. Linda shook her head, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away. People say stupid things sometimes, Phil. She didn't mean it. Yes, she did. Jennifer finally broke. I was drunk, okay? Her voice cracked, eyes wild with desperation. I didn't mean it. I wasn't thinking. Phil let out a slow, sharp breath. You were sober when you lied to my face the next morning. You were sober when you changed your passwords, when you deleted your texts, when you snuck around behind my back for weeks. Jennifer's mouth snapped shut. Her father was still quiet, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. Jennifer, is this true? Jennifer's face crumpled, but before she could speak, Claire jumped in again, exasperated. Dad, come on. It was one dumb comment. It's not like she actually slept with the guy. Phil is acting like a total psycho about this. Phil turned to her sharply. Would you still say that if it were reversed? If my friends had encouraged me to sleep with someone hotter before marrying Jennifer? Claire's mouth opened, then closed. Linda shook her head, voice still pleading. But Phil, she chose you in the end. Doesn't that mean anything? Phil let out a bitter laugh. No. She didn't choose me. She settled for me because the guy she wanted didn't want her back. Jennifer let out a broken sob. Mark exhaled deeply, rubbing a hand over his face. He looked tired, defeated. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to Phil. Jennifer, I didn't raise you to be this kind of person. Jennifer flinched like she had been struck. Phil didn't stay to watch the rest of it. He had said what he came to say. And now it was over. For good. Phil walked out of Jennifer's parents' house that night and never looked back. The weight on his chest was still there, but it felt lighter with every step he took away from that family, away from the woman who had so willingly betrayed him. He had wasted nearly a decade on Jennifer, on someone who had seen him as nothing more than a safe option. That realization cut deeper than anything else. But Phil wasn't going to let her destroy him. Within a week, he had moved out of their shared apartment and into a new place on the other side of the city. A fresh start. He cut off anyone who had sided with Jennifer and kept only the friends who had seen the truth for what it was. Then, he threw himself into self-improvement. The first place he went was the gym. It started as a way to burn off the anger, the frustration, the humiliation that still boiled under his skin. But soon, it became something more. It was control. It was discipline. It was his. Every drop of sweat, every extra rep, every mile on the treadmill, it was all proof that he was moving forward, that he was becoming stronger, not just physically, but mentally. While Jennifer was busy drowning in her own regrets, Phil was building himself into someone he could be proud of. Months passed. The pain dulled. The memories of Jennifer no longer consumed him like they once did. And then, just as he was starting to feel like himself again, life threw something unexpected his way. Her name was Sophia. She was tiny, barely 5 feet 2 inches, with dark curls that framed her face and a warmth about her that was completely disarming. Phil met her by accident in the most unremarkable way. A spilled coffee, an apologetic laugh, and a conversation that lasted longer than it should have. Sophia was a kindergarten teacher. She spent her days surrounded by finger paint and tiny handprints, by giggles and scraped knees and endless energy. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't the kind of woman who thrived on attention, but she was real. And for the first time in years, Phil found himself smiling without forcing it. Sophia didn't care about height, about status, about appearances. She cared about people. And unlike Jennifer, who had spent years looking over Phil's shoulder for something better, Sophia saw him for exactly who he was, and appreciated that. Their connection was easy. No games, no second-guessing, no wondering whether he was enough. With Sophia, he was enough. Meanwhile, Jennifer was unraveling. At first, she had tried to act like she was fine. Like losing Phil had been no big deal. She went out with friends, partied, posted pictures of herself looking unbothered and carefree. But the cracks were there, growing deeper by the day. The basketball coach, Derek, hadn't even given her a second glance. The night she had thrown herself at him, expecting validation, expecting to upgrade from Phil, he had barely acknowledged her. Then, just to twist the knife, Derek ended up dating exactly the kind of woman Jennifer had always envied, a model. Tall, elegant, effortlessly beautiful. Everything Jennifer had convinced herself she deserved to be. Suddenly, Jennifer wasn't laughing anymore. Her options dried up faster than she expected. The men she had thought would be lining up to date her never came. And the ones who did? They weren't interested in anything serious. Jennifer had spent so long looking for something better that she never realized she already had it. And now it was gone. That was when the letters started. Phil hadn't expected Jennifer to reach out, not after everything she had said, not after the way she had blamed him for her failures. But then, one day, an envelope showed up in his mailbox. He didn't open it. The next week, another one arrived. Then another. And another. Each letter was an apology. A desperate plea. I was stupid, Phil. I was selfish. I see that now. Please, just talk to me. I miss you. I miss us. I don't know how to move on. I hate myself for what I did. If I could take it all back, I would. Can we at least meet? Just once. Phil never responded. He had given Jennifer nearly 10 years of his life. He wasn't giving her one more second. One night, as he sat across from Sophia at dinner, watching her animatedly talk about her students, about the ridiculous things they said, about how much she loved teaching, he realized something. Jennifer had been obsessed with better. Always chasing the next best thing, never satisfied. But love wasn't about finding the tallest man or the richest or the most impressive. It was about respect, loyalty, the kind of love that didn't need to search for something better, because it already was. And for the first time in a long time, Phil knew he had finally found that.